Well, welcome, Greg. It's a pleasure to have you on Renewed Vision Through Exceptional Voices. I want to thank you for taking some time out of your day to do this interview. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Monica, and I'm looking forward to a real lively engagement.
Absolutely, and so am I. So I want to talk to you a little bit about first about what you've done and how you really became how you aligned your career with negotiating and how you got started in negotiations or learning about negotiations. Now I understand that your mother taught you or well, yes, taught you really about negotiations, and she helped you understand maybe the basics. But can you talk a little bit about that experience and how she got you started, or at least got you interested in learning more about being a negotiator?
Well, like good mothers, they teach their kids through their actions how
Yes.
to do anything at all that will stick with the kid. When I was younger, even at 4 years old, I would observe my mother negotiating for almost anything and everything. And I was even shiny shoes at the age of 4. And one thing I noticed that my mother had taught me was take note of how people respond.
Uh-huh.
And I started doing that when I was 4, shiny shoes. And thus, if I would smile at Mr. Jones at a particular point in time, I might end up getting a larger tip. That also led me to observing body language too of
Ah,
individuals. So not only did my mother establish the foundation within me to negotiate better, she gave me some great skills. Pay attention to people. No doesn't really mean no. It means no for the moment. Find
yes.
different ways to ask the same question to get to the end result that you're seeking, and a whole lot more. I'm telling you, Monica, she blessed me from a very early age, and by watching her negotiate for everything, I
Mm-hmm.
used to say to her, Mom, that's embarrassing to always ask people for a better price, or they're gonna think we're poor. She said, well, first of all, we are. And the other thing is, the more of your money you keep, the more you'll have to do other things. And I was like, hmm, that sounds good. Yeah, I better stick to what mama's teaching me
Yes.
before.
So then
So,
she really just learned how to negotiate, just basically being trying to be a good mother.
yes. Boy, I'm glad you said that because parents and kids are
Hmm.
constantly negotiating with one another. And
Yes.
thus the kid gets shaped by the parent's style of negotiations. If the parent is rough and tough, the kid may or may not, depending upon the personality type of that individual, become someone that's timid and afraid to engage in negotiations. Uh, Boy, I said no. That's the end of the story. Okay, so that kid may grow up being afraid to challenge someone as to
Hmm.
why they adopt a certain position. So, not only do parents need to be, I would suggest, cautious about the way they interact with their kids, but kids, as they grow up, need to understand the lessons that they're learning from their parents from a negotiation perspective.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Were there specific career choices that you made that helped you to become a master negotiator?
Well, definitely so, because
Hmm.
when I grew up, we were in an environment where you had to change your clothes before you could start working. That's to
Hmm.
say, sometimes it was manual labor, sometimes it was as a cook or whatever, but you had to change your clothes before you started working. And I remember my mother saying to me one day, sometime, saying to me one time, someday you will be in a position where you won't have to change your clothes before you start to work. And that led me to
Oh,
explore business. I mean, it was like, oh, wow. So, what do business people do? How do business people live? Well, the one thing I know for sure, they don't have to change their clothes before they start working. And that was something that set me on the path of understanding more about the operations of business. And the thing I realized next was wait a minute, successful business people know how to negotiate. And
hmm.
Monica, I said I started shiny shoes when I was 4. I worked at a grocery store when I was 11, 12. When I was in high school, I had an afternoon job, after school job, I should say. And I was always observing the interactions of individuals, especially those that were the head of certain operations and things of that nature, and watching how they did, what they did, when they did it, was something that I aspired to emulate in my life. And through the business manifestation that I adopted, I started my own business in 1993, which
I
doesn't
see.
seem like that long ago, but in reality,
Sure.
it is. You know? So I honed my negotiation skills. And a little sidebar, quick story. Before I started my own business, I was a vice president of an operations that had the highest margins within the company. The president of the organization said, "What's your division doing to get those margins that the others aren't?" And I thought about it. I said, "Well, hmm, I don't know, except, I teach my people how to negotiate." And he said, "Can you teach others in the company how to negotiate?" I said, sure. I had only been living my mother's edicts up to that point, and
Hmm.
I had learned a little more about negotiation styles, temperaments, et cetera, et cetera. But it was with that entree that I really started focusing more on negotiations. And that's been 35 plus years or so ago now, even though I look like I'm 22. So,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, okay. See, I got to watch your body language, Michelle. It's like, no, he didn't say he looked like 22. No, he ain't nowhere near 22.
So would you say then, let's say, for example, students, high school students and maybe even college students, they may participate on debating teams. Would that help with negotiations?
Oh my goodness, yes. I started saying OMG, but I'm told I'm too old to say that. But anyway, uh, definitely so. And the reason being, they can not only learn skills about debating styles,
Hmm.
but when you're negotiating, different types of negotiators use different styles of negotiations. So, if you can understand the debating platform, as it were, per how you address a counter argument or how you
Uh-huh.
position your statement and then the rebuttals that you offer to it, you are literally practicing negotiation styles at that particular point in time. So, that's something I encourage anyone, even those that are not let's say they're out of high school, that have gone through college or so forth and so on, to take some type of course about debating.
Excellent. That's excellent advice. How
Mhm.
how has helping other people learn how to effectively negotiate impacted your life and the perspective of what you do?
Oh, Monica, it has helped immensely. Why? Because when I train people and I do so worldwide, I learn also. So I may have a perspective about a particular negotiation style, a particular strategy to apply in a particular situation. Then all of a sudden, as I'm teaching it, someone gives me an idea, a thought that I all of a sudden then join together. It creates yet another thought. So the more everyone learns how to negotiate better, not only will they enhance their life, but they'll enhance the lives of those that they truly care about. And
Yes.
for me, I'm the type of individual that has to give back to others because I believe God placed all of us on earth to be a
Yes.
benefit to other individuals. So I'm
Absolutely.
living my dream, I'm living my life from that perspective.
Wonderful. I'm glad you found your purpose.
Definitely so.
Yes. Are negotiations generally the basis for compromise, meaning that there's going to be a focus on price?
Well, price is nothing more than the perception of value.
Hmm.
And thus, if I tell you I'll give you $100 and you say, well, what do I have to do for the $100? And I give you this long laundry list of things that'll take the next hypothetically 5 years to accomplish, you're going to say, no, it's not worth it. On the other hand, if I say I'll give you $100 if you can say yes 3 times, well, you look at the value proposition to that, and it's like, bet, yes, 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 bam, and you have $100. But now here's the twist, Monica. You always need to know from a negotiation perspective what's behind the offer. And what I mean by that is I just made the comparison of stretching out whatever the to-do list was over a number of years versus just saying yes, yes, yes 3 times for $100. And if you say yes to that offer, the yes, yes, yes offer for $100, I could then position you as such to say, well, you said yes, you would do X, Y, Z. You said yes that you would do A, B, C. You said yes that you would do uh, DEF or whatever be the case. And you would go, no, I didn't. And I would say, you didn't? So what did you mean to say? And all of a sudden now I've created a confusing situation for you. And thus you did not know what you were entering into
Mm-hmm.
when you said yes, 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 because you thought all I had to do was say yes, yes, yes to that $100 offer. The point is, know the covenants of an offer before
Uh-huh.
you accept it, the full covenants of an offer.
Thank you for that. That's, oh my goodness, that's great to know. But now, should you always pass on the first offer because most likely there's going to be another offer, a better offer coming?
Monica, the one thing I tell people a lot of times when they ask negotiation questions is, it depends. It depends on the person with whom you're negotiating. It
Uh-huh.
depends on all kinds of variables, such as how much time has been allotted for the negotiation. Where might that individual secure whatever he or she is seeking from you? How long might it take for that individual to do so? What will be the ongoing relationship after that particular episode of your negotiation processes? Is that person making the final offer? In some countries, the final offer is really the last opening offer that individual makes. So you're constantly delving to get deeper and deeper. Thus, you always need to know the culture that you're negotiating in. And the culture does not necessarily have to mean because you're in India, you have to negotiate more stringently versus being anywhere else in the world, the United States, Canada, or so forth and so on. It means understanding the perspective that individual has about the negotiation process. And here's where body language comes in also, because I can say to you, Monica, that's my best offer. I can also say to you, Monica, that's my best offer. Or I can say, are you serious? That's my best offer. Now, I use the same verbiage in all three situations,
Mm-hmm.
and yet my body language added a nuance of additional meaning to what I was conveying. And if you pick up on the individual that says, that's my best, that's the best offer, there's a little bit of wiggle room even in the way that individual said that versus the more sterner tone that someone used to convey their sentiments about the best offer. And by acknowledging to yourself that you have seen something that added value to the words that individual used, you could slightly alter your next rebuttal or the way that you position yourself. So if the individual said, that's my best offer, and again, you're thinking, he said it with a little bit of a shortness. Let me test him. That's your best offer? You pose it back in
Yes.
the question and see what that individual says. So the first offer does not necessarily mean you should accept it in some
Sure.
situations. It may be exactly what you want. So another way to answer the question is to say, you're thinking that you might get, let's say, $1,000 out of this deal, for example, purposes, and you've been offered $5,000. Now, you're over the moon at that particular point in time.
Mm-hmm.
But your perspective of what the offer should have been and that which was given to you is vast. You need to understand you do not display excitement. You don't start doing backflips or anything like that. Fine.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't do that at all. Instead, you might want to probe and say something along the lines of, well, I appreciate the offer. And then stop. Don't say a word
Uh-huh.
after that
Uh-huh.
and see what the other individual says. Well, okay. So does that mean you accept it? Accept it? You want that individual to continue talking because that's one way. By not answering the question directly, that you
Hmm.
can induce someone to negotiate with themselves. So, well,
Oh, and I've got a question on you for you about that
okay,
as well.
okay. So if they ask you, well, would 7,000 be enough?
Hmm.
7,000? Remember, you're at 1,000, but don't
Hmm.
go overboard because you don't want to run the risk of losing that particular deal, knowing that you were only at 1,000. But make somebody feel as though they earned what you negotiated with them, and that's the key point there.
Absolutely. And speaking of negotiating with yourself, so let's say I come into the room with the idea, or
Hmm.
it's my mindset that I want 50,000. I'm going to get $50,000, and then I try to second guess the other party by reducing my expectations of what I initially said I wanted by saying 40,000 to 50,000. Is that also considered negotiating with myself?
Well, if you tell me, well, I'm open to 40 to 50,000, guess what? I did not hear 50 at all. All I heard was 40. That's all I heard. That's all I heard. And that's the point from which I will attempt, depending
Hmm.
upon what we're negotiating for and the value proposition that's entailed in the deal. I'm going
Hmm.
to negotiate downward from that $40,000. Like I said, given mitigating circumstances. But if you give a range 40 to 50, I may even ask you, how did you come up with that range? And you're going to give me more insight about your whole thought process as to how you came to a range of 40 to $50,000 per your negotiation positioning.
Hmm.
And if I can understand more about the mindset that created your perspective of that range, I can then have components to address and attack to get you to lower your expectations.
Hmm.
So be careful when you give ranges. Be
So,
very
and I guess then there is no way to recover from that.
well, you can recover because you can say something along the lines of, oh, okay, so let's say hypothetically, I say, well, I'll tell you what, Monica, right now, we can bring you aboard at $40,000. You might say something along the lines of 40,000. You know how we went through that a moment ago. And hey, I may say 40,000. You know, if I'm throwing it right back at you, or I may say, yes, that's what we can do to bring you on, or bring you on. Do we have a deal? And you might then say, well, how about if we, and here's the point, have alternatives to your initial offer or with any offer that can add more perceived value to the offer such that you get closer to what it is that you were seeking. So, Monica, as a speaker, someone that is highly attuned to interviewing others and quite good at it, you might say something along the lines of, and I'll tell you what, if I do 40,000 now listen to this one, Monica. If I do $40,000, can you guarantee that I can interview your CEO on my program? Now the person's going, wait a minute. Uh, she's adding value to me, or is she? You've confused the individual momentarily.
Hmm.
And if the individual then says, well, no, I can't make that happen, you could then go back to the range that you created. Well, okay, how about if we do 50,000 then? Because
Oh,
that
yeah.
yeah, that's right, because now you're adding you gave that individual a perspective from which they could add more value,
Hmm.
for bringing you in at that higher range that you mentioned. They declined, they couldn't deliver, so now you're back up there again. And you can do it if you're a professional speaker and you're an author. You can do it with having that entity purchase additional books. You could do it with anything that adds value to your proposition. And the point is, you need to understand what that is before you enter into that
Yes,
negotiation. And you need to have it
absolutely.
really written out and thought out thoroughly. If they say X, I'll do Y. If they do Y, I'll do Z. You go through the whole planning phase of the negotiation way before you get
Hmm.
to the negotiation table.
Oh, that's excellent. Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Mm.
Excuse me. So, how important is it to build trust with the other party prior to the negotiation? And how long should you do that? I mean, how long should you take to try to build trust with them?
It depends.
Hmm.
And like I said, I use that a lot. But it depends on the type of negotiation you will enter into, the length that the negotiation will take, the outcome that you're seeking, what you plan to have occur after that negotiation has terminated.
Hmm.
Trust is an important factor in a negotiation
Yes.
because it says, I know I can depend on this person to complete whatever we agree on as far as the outcome is concerned. And if that trust is broken, well, that becomes that individual may be skeptical about whatever you say you're going to agree to or commit. So
Hmm.
not only is it important, it needs to be something that's consistently built, because you can build trust over a lifetime and lose it in a moment's notice simply
True.
because at the exact wrong time you betray someone's trust. And it's like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, as the cliche goes.
Hmm.
So build it and understand the value it has. But trust can be used as a weapon also. And what I mean by that is you can, this is a devious negotiation ploy. Okay. I'll just put it out there like that. You can say to someone, I don't believe you did that. I mean, you broke the covenant of our agreement. And the individual goes, what are you talking about? Now you put that individual on the defense.
Yes.
And here's the thing, even if that person has not broken the covenants of the agreement, you can gain more insight about what it might take for that person to do so. Thus, from the reverse of that, you're instilling more trustworthiness in that
Hmm.
individual. That's to say, don't step across the line.
Yes. Wow. Oh my goodness. Boy, am I getting an education.
Well, every time I'm with you, I get one. So, hey, call the debt paid.
N- Now, some people speak, as you know, I'm sure, some people speak very fast or they become overly excited about what it is that they're talking about or communicating. Can that work against you when you're trying to negotiate with someone?
Definitely so, and possibly not. See, I
Hmm.
chose a variation of depends that time. Um, Depending upon the environment you're in, you may speak fast because the other individual speaks fast, and people tend to like people that like themselves. So if I'm speaking fast
I
and you're
see.
speaking fast, it's like, hey, we're on the same page type of thing. But if someone is speaking very slowly, you might think that they are really deliberating what you're saying, or you might think it's time to take a nap. No, the point being though, you want to emulate someone's pace of speech to the
Yes.
degree that it serves you. So if you're speaking fast and I speak fast, again, we are of like-mindedness subliminally. If all of a sudden we come to a point where there's a possible impasse in the negotiation, and we both been speaking fast up to that point, and then all of a sudden I say, wait a minute, Jim, I think we need to re-examine this point. Now, I put a definition at that particular moment in time about where we are in the negotiation, and in defining that that wall that we've come up against,
Hmm.
I've also added extra value by changing the pace of speech, display more deliberance, and highlighting the fact with the tonality at which I conveyed my sentiments. And thus, people need to also observe not only the tone in which someone speaks, but the word choice that they use to convey their thoughts. There's a difference between someone that says, I think we are going to be okay with this outcome, as opposed to, I think we're going to be okay with this outcome, as opposed to, we're going to be okay with this outcome. That word think in there is that
Hmm.
small little nuance, and the extra pace that it took me with the first example of saying that also delineated my thought process per how I was feeling about what I was saying. Here's a little sidebar about body language.
Hmm.
Our body always wants to stay in a state of comfort. When a baby has soiled itself, the baby will cry. Why? Because the baby's body is out of that state of comfort. We do little things to indicate that we're trying to put our body back into a state of comfort when we feel anxiety. We may touch our face, we may rub our hands together as we're speaking. We may even be rubbing our legs with eyes or arms or whatever be the case. But there are little nuances conveyed through body language that indicates the inner thoughts that someone is experiencing and how they are receiving the message that you have sent to them. So
Hmm.
body language plays an enormous role in being a good negotiator.
Can ejecting emotions be a valuable approach during negotiations?
Did you say detecting or ejecting?
Injecting.
Injecting emotion. Yes, yes, yes. Did you notice? I even said
Yes.
yes, yes. Again, it's those small variances that one
Yes.
needs to observe
Hmm.
because if you said, I can only do 40 to 50,000, and you sat back even, that is a form of nonverbal communications
Mm.
that's conveying emotional uh, insight, and it's adding extra value to your meaning. Now, you can also verbally inject emotions by saying, wow, Greg, I wish, I really, really wish that I could do the 40,000, but I can't. Now wait a minute. It's like, wait, whoa, whoa, whoa. Where was she going with that? She was calm and collected, and then all of a sudden she went off the rails. What just happened? There are ways to motivate people to move
Hmm.
from one perspective in a negotiation through emotions and body language
Sure.
versus another. And you have to not only calculate what emotions to inject into a negotiation, but when. And again, when we talked about the planning phase earlier of
Hmm.
how you will react in a negotiation, that's how you determine what emotions you will inject and project in the planning stage of the negotiation. Because if I'm negotiating with someone that has the reputation of, let's say, being a bully when they negotiate someone, the only way they think they can win, even, is if they make you lose. Which can be a variant of someone that's either a bully or just a tough negotiator, which is something you should know going into the negotiation because you should do your research. But if I know I'm going to negotiate with someone of that ilk, then I'm going to prepare myself differently than I would if I was negotiating with someone that was a go along to get along type of individual. And thus, one of the things I may think of with the person that's more stern is, how will I respond to any type of reaction that
Hmm.
person may display? Banging the table all of a sudden, raising his
I
voice,
see.
trying to intimidate me. So I'm prepared for that action if it comes, and thus he may bang the table. This is the best daggone offer. I don't even know why we're going further with this. And I'm sitting there, calm and collective, and I say,
Yes.
"Thank you for that. I appreciate your perspective." And the guy is thinking to himself, "Wow, I'm not getting through to this person. Did you hear what I said?" Of course, I heard what you said. You're shouting it loud enough for people in the next whatever to hear, and you can change that whole thing into some form of levity also, and
Hmm.
use it to alter the pace and direction of the negotiation.
Oh, absolutely. Oh my goodness, that was great. Now, so when you're talking about stress and emotion, so for example, if the person on the other side um, is experiencing emotional stress, let's say they were told, "Don't come back without a deal." How can you, I guess, pick up on that and then be able to leverage it?
Excellent question. First of all, again, in the planning phase of your negotiation, you've dug into why that individual is negotiating with you, gotten the perspective of the time frame in which the negotiation will occur, and again, you try to gain insight into what
Hmm.
that individual is going to do if a deal is not concluded with you. How quickly can they pivot to another resource, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, if you suspect that the individual may be under some type of pressure to conclude a deal with you, you may
Hmm.
actually ask outright, okay, so can you tell me what will occur if we can't reach a deal today? I mean, come right out and ask the person and watch the reaction.
Hmm.
Person says, oh, I have other resources. The person says, well, I have other resources. Same words. Did you notice the
Yes.
minute difference? Okay, so now you've gotten some insight when the person has leaned away, took that deep breath also before responding. That wait a minute, I hear your words, but buddy, your body language is telling me something altogether different than what your words was conveying. Your words were conveying. Follow the body, by the way.
Hmm.
Yeah, you can hear what someone says they're going to do, but watch what they do instead.
Sure.
And if you then sense and you probe to find out what that individual may have as far as time frame and or what they're going to do if they can't reach a deal with you. And sometimes, Monica, I've been in situations where people have come right out and said, I've been told I have to do this deal with you. They come right out and
Ah,
said that. I don't take advantage of people. And that's one way. We talked
yes.
about trust earlier. That's
Hmm.
one thing that you can instill in some relationships that will allow someone to feel comfortable enough to come out and say something of that nature,
Hmm.
knowing that you're not going to take advantage of it. Did you notice the synchronization of my body language, knowing that you're not going to take advantage of it? I would say, no, no, I'm not going to take advantage of you. No, I'm not going to do that. As opposed to someone that said, no, I'm not going to take advantage of you. You know, so again, it's those small nuances that
Yeah,
we must be attuned to when we're negotiating.
I caught that.
Mhm, mhm.
um, does a person's physical appearance play a role in whether or not they win negotiations or negotiation?
It can, and again, here's where I'll use it depends.
Hmm.
Um, First of all, winning a negotiation is perceptual. You
Hmm.
always want to leave the other individual with the premise in his or her mind that they won something in the negotiation. The
Yes.
reason being, if that person feels as though they lost the negotiation, they may find a way or attempt to find a way to sabotage it, such as to make their outcome a little better. And thus,
Hmm.
you have to be careful when someone says, "Well, yes, we'll agree to this, that, and the other," and you've gotten the lion's share of that outcome. And then next thing you know, you get a call and they say, well, my boss, my whomever the higher authority is, has said, I'm sorry, but we can't agree to that. So you always want to make somebody feel as though they did win something. And the way you do that is to ask the question. So, how do you feel about the outcome of our negotiation? Some people are afraid to ask that question because they think it's an opening. They give that other individual an opening to actually say, well, I wasn't happy about this, that, or the other, or I could be
Hmm.
happier about that, that, and the other. And you shut that down real fast. Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So that means you're going to abide by our agreement, right? So you get confirmation. But even more so, Monica, in the opening of the negotiation, you want to ask the question: do you have final authority to conclude a deal and deliver on it if we,
Hmm.
depending upon how you want to position yourself, when we conclude this deal? And the individual says yes. Now, said yes at the opening, test it as you get closer towards the end of the deal. I've thoroughly enjoyed negotiating with you on this aspect of our interactions. I just want to reiterate, you do have the final authority to conclude this deal and deliver on it, right? Person says yes. Okay, let's continue. If you suspect that individual does not have the final authority, test it at different stages throughout the
Hmm.
negotiation process, because you don't want to get to the end of the negotiation and the person say, well, now I'm going to bring in whoever the higher authority happens to be. Oh, and getting back to the other question you asked about was it dressing or how you
Yes.
present
Your
yourself?
physical appearance.
Your physical appearance. Yes,
Uh huh.
there are times when it will behoove you. And let's use buying a car as an example.
Uh huh.
Yeah, there are times when if I'm buying a car, I'll take off my jewelry,
Hmm.
and I don't want to give clues. Although you take off the ring, and obviously the salesperson is going to say, something's missing there. Uh, exactly. But the reason I do that is because I don't want to give insights as to my financial status or things of that
Sure.
nature. People pick up on certain things and they go, "Oh, well, he must have yada yada yada." The salesperson starts making assumptions. If you go in and let's say you even look a little ragged,
Hmm.
well, that does not necessarily hold true depending upon with whom you're negotiating. So if
Sure.
you're buying a Mercedes in today's environment, they're 20-year-old somethings that have buku.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so you have to be careful. But from a negotiation perspective, I take off such adornments so that I don't give additional insight about my
Hmm.
financial status. And I may even talk a little slower than I would normally speak to show, hey, well, this guy is not sophisticated, especially when it comes to negotiations. And I
Hmm.
do that to see exactly what that individual will attempt to do with me. You know, we've all had the situation where the salesperson is talking to the potential customer that's buying a car, and then the salesperson has to go talk to the manager to get yada yada. Again, the salesperson is leaving you with the belief that he or she is appealing to a higher authority. And they're doing so on your behalf. I'm with you, Mr. and Mrs. Customer. I want to make sure that I get the best deal for you. In reality, they go in the back and they do X, Y, Z. But to the
Yes.
degree you don't give them more information about your physical appearance and what you are adorned with, you can contain some of the information that they might otherwise have. The salesperson goes back and really does have a conversation with the manager, and the salesperson says, "Well, he's trying to ask for a 7,000 reduction in the price of the car, and yet he's wearing a Rolex. What's that all about? You giving up too much information. Take it
Yes.
off, take it off, take it off.
Hmm.
Take off some of the things that you wear and adorned with. That's what I should say. Not take it
Hmm.
all off.
But
Because the
now, but looking at
PG-13.
that,
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
yes, but looking at that from, so let's say it's a different type of negotiation, and you are, let's say you have a service that you're, or product that you are looking to negotiate a good deal on, and you go into the room. You have one side who they are dressed in suits, ladies in their skirts and their jackets, and but then on the other side you have, they're good, they're professional, and they know what they're doing, but they are dressed, let's say, just in, maybe a jacket or khakis or something like that. Does the side that is dressed, to the T, so to speak, do would they maybe get some indication that, I don't know, they don't look professional, so maybe they don't know, they may not, can't, they probably can't do this job, or they're not professional negotiators. How is that perceived?
Well, once again, it depends
Hmm.
because how have you positioned yourself prior to
Hmm.
entering into that environment is what you should consider. So we all have brands, as it were. What you need to ask is why would someone project a particular persona that's not consistent with their brand?
I
If
see.
you walk into a Mercedes dealership versus, I'll just say, a Ford dealership, you'll notice in the Mercedes dealership, the people are dressed with suits and ties on. In the Ford dealership, they may be walking around with khakis and a shirt. They're trying to say that they're like the people that they're servicing, but to
Yes.
what degree do you alter your perspective to say, I'm not like everyone else? And the
Hmm.
answer is, it depends. It depends on how you wish to be perceived and the negotiation strength that you really have at that particular situation, or I should say, in that particular situation at that particular time.
Hmm. I see. Now, earlier you did talk about having counter offers or alternatives. So, but how many should you have on hand? Does that depend on what it is that you're negotiating?
Yes, and when you said depend, I mean you you saw the reaction because that's exactly what I was going to say. It depends. Yes, uh, and here's the point: you want to have as many options available as you think will be needed to reach the goals that you seek
Hmm.
from the negotiation, and thus 40 to 50 isn't something we can do because we can only do 40, and you're going to add on some extra perceived value that may be perceived as value for that entity or for yourself. There are things called red herrings in negotiations, things that you
Hmm.
create as value that really mean nothing to you, but in order for that individual to not grant it to you, they have to give up something. So you're always trying to create some form of value, number one. Number two, you want to make sure that you can position yourself such that you are better able to show through multiple offers that you are flexible. Okay, we can't do 40,000. Can we do 50,000 plus 5 extra weeks of vacation? Oh, we can't do that either. Well, can we do? And here's the other thing: hold in reserve what you really want as that extra something if you can't reach the top range of your goals, to throw
Hmm.
that in there, because people don't necessarily like saying no, 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 no.
Sure.
So at some point in time, give them a way to say yes by throwing in at the appropriate time the extra something that you really want. And they'll go, okay, yes, you can have that. Now, do we have a deal? So yes, and it depends is the answer to the question.
I see. What advice can you? So obviously, there are many times when negotiations come to a halt, and nobody is willing to. No one is willing to compromise. So, what advice can you offer for those types of situations?
Well, once again, you've planned for a possible impasse. And how did you get there? It was based on X, Y, Z. So you
Hmm.
know what to address. So you think. Let's say XYZ did not turn out to be what created the impasse. Let's also further convolute the situation and say you hadn't even anticipated what causes the impasse or what might have caused the impasse. Anytime you are at a point where you are indecisive about what to do next in a negotiation, you call a timeout. And a timeout is in the form of getting away from the negotiation table. In that particular situation, you may say something along the lines of, wow, I appreciate the honesty and forthrightfulness that you've engaged this negotiation thus far. It seems like we're at an impasse. Would you agree? And the individual may say yes, or the other individual may say, well, why do you think that? Well, so the impasse you thought you were at is not necessarily the one that you find yourself based on that person's perspective and response. And you can then say, well, because I thought we would agree on X, Y, Z, and you've said no. I don't know where to go next. What would you suggest we do? Now you're asking that person for that person's buy-in to continue in the negotiation. And the person says, well, we may not be able to agree on X, Y, Z, but if we can alter slightly A, B, C, well, uh, I think we may be able to continue the discussions. And let's say two paths. You can agree on A, B, C to alter that, and you've planned on how you're going to do it. So that breaks the impasse. Let's say you cannot agree on A, B, C. And you might say, well, you know, I just can't do A, B, C. I don't have the authority to do A, B, C. How about if we just pause the negotiation for right now and reconvene at another time or something of that nature?
Hmm.
What you've done is left the negotiation door cracked. It's not closed, left it
Yes.
cracked such that you can come back into it. And a lot of times, when you have a chance to reflect on what occurred and how things got to where they ended up, you can then think of possible solutions to offer. But it goes back to the question you asked also earlier about how many offers should you have. And I said as many as needed to reach the outcome you're seeking. You should be able to think of additional offers, different counter offers, different rebuttals you can offer. But Monica, all deals will not conclude successfully when you're negotiating. And that
Hmm.
has to be part of your realization and your planning process too, because you should always have additional resources that you can turn to obtain what you want. That gives you leverage in your current negotiation.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. That makes excellent sense there to
Mm.
always have something else besides. In other words, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Oh, I like the way you summarize that. Very succinct. Oh
Well,
boy.
this has been fantastic. I mean, you've given us uh, some excellent things to think about. When it comes to negotiations. I mean, whether you're a business owner or an entrepreneur or not. I mean, you could just be the everyday person. Living your everyday life or doing whatever it is that you do. And as you mentioned early on, in the conversation is that parents and kids, they negotiate. Of course, you're always negotiating. So I want to
Mhm.
thank you, for taking the time to really point out some wonderful things about how we meaning business owners and entrepreneurs, how we can learn how to negotiate much better. Now you've written many books, so many books, and you have a lot of different products that you offer as well. But two of your most recent books. One is Body Language Secrets, and then the other is Negotiating with a Bully. Can you talk a little bit about those two?
Yes, Body Language Secrets to Win More Negotiations really goes in depth about the body language one should observe in the
Hmm.
negotiation process. Because as you and I spoke earlier, the body language gestures or signals that are emitted during someone's response, offer, counteroffer adds another dimension to the words they use to convey their sentiments. And if you pick up on the body language gestures, you can then truly know more about what that individual is attempting to say, or
Hmm.
to what degree they believe what they're saying, and the degree of truthfulness. And that's what the book actually does. It points out little nuances that one should observe, how to apply certain body language gestures yourself when you're
Hmm.
negotiating to be more convincing. Because if I say, "Oh, Monica, this is a great deal," versus, "Monica, this is a great deal." I've said something differently, even though the
Yes.
words are the same. And the book highlights some examples of how one can improve their negotiation skills by reading body language. Negotiating with a Bully
Hmm.
talks more about how it is that one should position oneself and the allies with whom those that are negotiating with someone that is stern or a bully should ally themselves with. Because with bullies, you have to understand what their source of motivation happens to be. Are they trying to impress XYZ? Well, what happens if you instead get XYZ onto your side? Well, you've taken the bully's leverage and power away from him, and that leaves the bully bare when that individual is trying to negotiate with you. And also, negotiating with the bully goes into greater depths of how to identify different negotiation styles, the differentiation between someone that might be a stern negotiator as opposed to someone that happens to be a true bully. And you
Yes.
definitely negotiate with those individuals differently. The book highlights those.
Hmm. Now I've heard you in the past. I believe I read where you mentioned something to the effect that you don't want to negotiate with an idiot. So how do you recognize an idiot?
I didn't say that. No. Let's say, how do you negotiate with someone that is less efficient in the negotiation process?
Oh
Well,
boy.
it goes back to making people feel good about
Hmm.
engaging you. Because somebody has a perspective of what the world is or what
Sure.
reality is. Okay. If you can alter their perspective, that's good. But seriously, if the person is a real idiot, leave them alone. Leave them alone. Leave them
I
alone.
guess that's the best advice you can have.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I don't want to waste my time. My gosh. But seriously though, Monica, early on, if you really do sense someone has that type of demeanor,
Hmm.
discern whether or not they are play acting, because they could be
Oh,
play acting to
I
see
see.
what you will do with someone displaying those characteristics.
Yes.
Make sure you truly understand that first. And if you can
Hmm.
understand that, okay, this person is putting on an act, you can come right out and call them on it. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I know you are not like that.
Hmm.
Like what? Oh, boy, I just exhibited a body language gesture. Like
Hmm.
what? The head tilting is inquisitiveness.
Hmm.
And if you actually saw them tilt their head with that signal and said, like what? I don't know. It seems like your logic is off. Don't come right out and call them an idiot.
Sure.
It seems like your logic is off. How are you
Yes.
coming to your conclusions? Well, I heard. Okay, listen to what they heard, and they are then referring to sources that they follow to
Hmm.
actually give them guidance. per how they should act or think about a particular certain situation. It then gives you the insight to know whether or not to address that authority figure that they've referred to, and or embrace that individual. And thus you can alter the less sophisticated person's persona to the
Yes.
degree that you bring it more in the realm of reality.
Mhm. Oh, excellent. Excellent advice. I appreciate that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, I do like your slogan. Remember, and your slogan is remember you're always negotiating. So I know negotiating is obviously it's not just for business. So
Hmm.
what can the everyday person do to become better at negotiating to achieve their best life, to live their best life?
First of all, negotiate for everything. And when I
Hmm.
say that, I'm being extremely serious. Negotiate for everything. Understand with whom you're negotiating, because you can go into, let's say, Best Buy in the United States, and you can negotiate with the salesperson on the floor. And the person says, well, I can't give you a lower price. Well, you then might ask, well, can your supervisor give me a better price? The person can say no, or the person can say, well, I don't know. I've used that tactic before when a sale actually ended and I went in and asked for the same price that the item was offered for sale that had already ended. And the salesperson said, well, I can't give you that. I said, why not? Well, because the sale has ended. Now, I said, but come on now. I know your management has empowered you to make a sale as opposed to losing one, right? And the person said, well, and I'm thinking to myself, aha, that person's in deliberative mode. And the person said, well, no, I really can't. I say, so your supervisor can, right? Now, that's making an assumptive question. We didn't talk about assumptive questions, but assumptive questions assumes something can be accomplished. And that means the other individual has to defend why it cannot be. And the person said, well, I think it can. I think he can. So I said, okay, so can you bring him out? So sure enough, the salesperson brought this supervisor out, and I ended up getting the item at the sale price that had already ended. And the point being, though, negotiate for everything. Don't take no as the final answer to your quest. No only means no for the moment. And in negotiating for everything and anything, understand you have to negotiate with the right person. You hone
Yes.
your skills by continuously learning from what worked and what did not work. And in so doing, you'll heighten your negotiation expertise.
Excellent advice.